Coming up, the New York Football Giants lose a heartbreaker up in Buffalo to the Bills in what felt like maybe a season-defining moment. We break down the excellent performance on the defensive side of the ball and whether or not Tyrod Taylor, including that first half decision, gave us a sample size with which to compare to one Daniel Jones. We dive in coming up next. Yes, sir. It is OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where you know that we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Armbrecht. Over there, Andrew Makowitz. Again, another type of day where I just think we bypass the pleasantries, Andrew, because there was a lot to take away from a game that the Giants were perceived by everyone, Vegas included, to be massive underdogs. And yet, they narrowly, they could have pulled out a win on the road. Instead, 1-5 and staring down the barrel of a continued disappointing season.
Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory feels like a good way to describe it because the Giants overall played well enough to win that game, Adam. They did.
Yeah.
And, you and I both didn't really give the Giants much of a chance in our predictions. We expected it to be a double digit loss, not really compelling. And it turned out to be completely opposite of what I was expecting because we saw things that we hadn't seen all season, especially coming from the defense, who, man, oh man, they step up in a big way.
Yeah, we're going to get to them coming up here in a second because that's the big feather in the cap here, comparing it to last week. And obviously, maybe Xavier McKinney's comments would have been more applicable after last night's game as opposed to a week ago. But we start where it ended here just quickly. The Giants get down there. They get the pass interference penalty on Darren Waller. They get the ball placed at the 1. I think both agree. I never like to put it in the position where you go, well, if not for the referees, right? And the explanation is going to be, well, you're not going to give that penalty a second time in a row. Why not? Because now, when we're going to talk about play calling in this episode as well, but when you look at that play, my initial take on it was, listen, the ball's up there. Waller gets his hand on it. Yeah, they're jockeying, but I really, I get why they wouldn't call it. You got to go play. But on the rewatch, not only does he hold his jersey from the second that he leaves the line of scrimmage, okay, fine. Like, you want to say that's a part of it. But when you went and watched actually when the throw arrives, the reason why Darren Waller only gets one hand up is because his other arm is being pulled down and away from it. That was the part. That was the moment to me where it was, okay, now we have an issue here. Because if he gets to put both hands up there and you want to say that tug wasn't going to be addressed on the jersey, fine. But that was, you're getting to egregious nature there at that point. And I think we always say, I just don't want to hear from the referees too much. I wouldn't have hated hearing from them one more time in this game.
Yeah, listen, I think Art Stapleton brought it up best earlier this morning when he said, hey, listen, like, was it a foul? Yes. Do Giant fans remember when they played Washington last year and
Of
there
course.
was a non-call, could have been pass interference on the Giants doing something very similar? Sure. And those types of plays are kind of bang bang. To be honest with you, okay, so let's say they throw the flag there and they move it a quarter of an inch forward. The
That's
Giants
right.
still have to find a way to get that ball in the end zone, which I think everyone's kind of saying, well, they would have called it for sure. The Giants would have scored. I don't know. It felt like that was going to be a tough task no matter what, right?
100%. And that's actually going to be a theme of another area we're going to talk about when we'll get back to the first half, Tyrod Taylor before the half ends and all of that went on there, the debacle, right? So this assumption of what it would have meant, I think is something that I will debunk the idea of, well, if only for this, and there's several moments throughout this game, penalties wise, the one with the illegal quote man downfield, not a real thing. That was a big pass to Jalen Hyatt. That was a bit of a backbreaker for this team as well. But before we dive back into that, let's talk defense, because you and I coming in this game, you said, didn't give the Giants a chance. And we also said, like, where is this season? When I asked you, you said, I don't know. Can anything perceptually change for you in this game against Buffalo to make you think there's still a shot? With the way the defense played and how they held down, 3 out of the first 4 drives were punts, and the other drive was a turnover. With the way they performed, do you now look at it and say, this defense showed me what you and I at least thought on paper this team had in the offseason, a potential top 12, top 10 kind of defense that could actually carry things for the Giants?
Let's give credit to where credit is due. The defense kept the Giants in this game. The defense gave them an opportunity to win the game. It's the first time Buffalo hadn't scored any points in a first half since 2019. And that 2019 game was they already had the season the playoffs wrapped up, weren't even really playing for anything. So it's been quite a while since the Josh Allen team hasn't looked explosive.
Held scoreless through 3 quarters.
Yeah,
Remember, they didn't score
yes,
until the fourth quarter of this game.
the defense played phenomenal. They really did, Adam, and they were shorthanded a little bit. Adoree Jackson got knocked out for a little bit. Dane Belton got the wind knocked out of him. Micah McFadden went off for a couple of plays.
No Aziz in this game
Azeez
already, maybe
Ojulari
heading
was
towards
not
IR,
not
right?
there in the game.
Yeah.
They did
Yeah.
not have any real pass rush outside of Thibodeau getting into the backfield. The defensive line of Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence stepped up big time. Dexter Lawrence was getting pressure up the middle consistently, making Josh Allen move off script. We know how good he is off script, but at least he's making him uncomfortable, weird throws, things like that. I mean, the defense played about as well as you can do against a top 5 offense in the league, and they played well enough to win this game. Make no mistake about it. And I think you got to give credit. Wink Martindale found a way to get pressure, knowing that they're kind of shorthanded, at the edge rushing position, and they had no sacks in this game. They did it all just playing straight up defense. I mean, let's just talk about Bobby Okereke for a second. He felt like he was everywhere on the field. It feels like the last couple games he's getting comfortable. I think he had 11 tackles in the game. He forced the fumble that Micah McFadden recovered. He deflected the ball that Micah McFadden intercepted. To me, he was clearly the player of the game on the defensive side of the ball for the Giants. But I mean, if the defense can play like this, then those comments you mentioned about Xavier McKinney saying, "Well, we're not going to put on the defense." No one's putting anything on the defense in this game. If they can play like this and play competitive and hold teams to 1 score or 2 scores, I know it's saying a lot in the NFL. The Giants have an opportunity when Adam, when they're giving up 30 something a game and our offense can't move the ball, it feels like there's no hope whatsoever. But
Mhm.
if the defense can keep the offense in the game, then hopefully we look and we say maybe we turn some of those field goals into touchdowns and the Giants have a lead at the end of the game and can steal a game like that against Buffalo.
Yeah, I agree with you on all these points. Bobby Okereke, I thought you mentioned last week too. I think he's finally starting to show the reason why you signed him in the offseason, what he's supposed to represent. Had 2 pass deflections, as you noted, had a couple of tackles for a loss as well in this game. Like you said, no sacks, but the pressure was there. I think it had to be enough for Kayvon Thibodeau to say, I know I'm going to get shielded away and it's going to be a long route, but as long as I keep pursuing, I can force Josh Allen off his spot. And there was a couple of plays in this game where Josh Allen landed on his shoulder, including another penalty that we didn't appreciate on Bobby Okereke for roughing the passer, which on the replay did not look legitimate, but Allen fell on his shoulder a couple of times and you could see. So I wondered how that impacted the way they looked. I also think the defense played very well. The little like moment for me watching this defense, as we said all season long, is when they've had to bring Dexter Lawrence out, when Leonard Williams has to come out, they've gotten gashed at times by the running game, right? And they had back-to-back runs here from Cook at one point for multiple first downs. And again, like I rewound back to the start of this game, and I kept thinking, boy, maybe because the Giants have been a bad team on both sides of the ball. We saw this from Tua against Miami, where he's throwing interceptions and turnovers, but didn't seem to really be overly concerned about it. There was a world where I think if Buffalo had come out and said, we're going to run the ball on you to start this game, we're going to run the ball over and over again, I actually think they would have been in a far better position to maintain time of possession, to get some scores early there. It did seem to play at least a little bit into, for a team that has a hard time getting pressure, wants to stay in soft zones, wants to keep things in front of them. Wink Martindale did an excellent job, and the game script just started to go that way. And I think if you're the Bills, if you're one of the better teams in the league, I do think there's a thing that happens when you're trying to throw the ball and the Giants are frustrating you. Couple punts, couple punts. I think Josh Allen is susceptible to this too. He's like, we're better than them. We can do this, right? We can make these plays. We can make those throws. So you go back to it, 1 or 2 more extra drives than you should. And then all of a sudden the game flow is off and you're not putting up points. And that's where a game like this changes completely from what you perceive it to be. And I think if you played this game 100 times, this might be one of the most unique score lines you would ever come to, because I think more often than not, that offense is going to move the ball, even as well as this defense played. So hats off to them. You mentioned guys going down in and out of the lineup. Cordell Flott made some nice plays. Xavier McKinney made some nice plays. Like I have nothing negative. I'm sure I could go in and nitpick some guys, But Wink Martindale did his job yesterday. He did his job and gave this team a chance to win on the offensive side of the ball.
Could not agree more. 6 of 12 on third downs for the Buffalo Bills. The defense was getting off the field when they needed to. When it's felt like all year on those 3rd and 5s, they're letting someone scramble out, they pick it up, and it's demoralizing for the defense. The defense held up, got the ball back to the offense, and clearly, settling for field goals instead of touchdowns or no points at all in key situations is really where it felt like the game got lost for the Giants.
Once again, the Giants win the turnover battle, but lose the game. All right, let's rewind back now.
Well, Adam,
Go ahead.
I
Give
wanted
that
to
key
give
stat
one
there. Yeah,
stat that I had sent you over.
this is a nice one.
OptaStats
This is
put this one
juicy.
out. It's just it's a great stat, which is why this is so confounding to all of us. They said the Giants are the only NFL team in the Super Bowl era to have more rushing yards, more passing yards, fewer interceptions, fewer fumbles, and fewer missed field goals than their opponent, and still lose the game. Teams have been 134-0 in the Super Bowl era when
Yeah.
doing all of those things.
We shatter records, buddy. That's
Just
what
breaking
we do.
records left and right.
Yeah, that's what we do in New York. Nobody defined which way they had to be. No one said they had to be good records. We're doing it though. Good Lord. And it really does. It accentuates what this season has been. Whatever could go right went right last year to get some wins. Whatever can go wrong does go wrong. Okay. So we label this as player review. And let's start with Tyrod Taylor and let's start with the end of the first half. This is going to dovetail into an issue that I have on that side of the ball. You get down there, you have 14 seconds left. I'm watching this over on the PSF app, doing the live watch party. After they get that play and they get down there, I say, all right, this is great. No timeouts, but you have every opportunity here. The only thing you can't do is run the ball, but you get a couple of cracks, try to make something happen, maybe go to Waller, etc. Try to scheme your way to it. Tyrod Taylor gets up to the line, audible, run play. Barkley gets stopped. He says after the game, I got to get there. We all know that line isn't going to let you get there. And they don't end up getting that play off, and they go to halftime. Brian Daboll's like, what the heck, Tyrod? You can't do that. You can't do that. What is your perception of that play? Because I have something that I actually think that is a bit of a microcosm of one of my concerns this season with this team.
First and foremost, when the play call comes in, usually there's a run and a pass, and the quarterback can audible to whatever they need to do on the field. That's just the way that football works. One, the offensive coordinator has to say, there is no audible. There's no change of play. Let's make sure we understand situationally. It's like in basketball when you're like, we don't have any more timeouts. You cannot call a timeout here, Chris Webber. Like, no matter what you do, you cannot. So first and foremost, there was a fail in the offensive calling in the play to Tyrod to be like, under no circumstances are we running the ball, right?
Okay, so point stop right there, because that's where I was going to go with this. It does not excuse Tyrod Taylor not knowing there's 14 seconds, etc. But the world where one of two things: either you say, I know that we're calling what is traditionally an option play for us. It's not an option here. We want the passing route off of this play. Okay, great, fine. Either you're deadly communicating that, or don't call a play that has an option on it. Because again, it doesn't excuse Tyrod from this, but a quarterback who has ingrained the playbook into his mind, when he's in the huddle and he hears the play come in, you know that he's walking to the line, watching the defense and saying, whoop, there's the little shift. Now that means normally when we see that, I go to the run play. And again, it's still the wrong choice. It's still on Tyrod there. But this is the larger issue to me on the offensive side of the ball. I do not feel like, and I can point out other examples in this game, that offensively, the game plan is maximizing the value of the weapons they have and finding creative ways to be successful.
Yeah, but I agree with you. The play calling was questionable. The fact that that is not relayed and explained over and over again. And some people may say, look, Tyrod is a veteran quarterback, 33 years
100%.
old. He needs to know that. And the answer is 100%. There needs to be multiple fail safes there to be able to say, like, if you don't tell him there's absolutely no audible to a run play, he as a veteran quarterback needs to know, hey, we have
Right.
11 seconds. We have the opportunity to get 3 potential passing plays off here. It was still first down, Adam. Or we have one run play that if we don't get it, the half is over. Like, there was plenty of time to be able to run 3 plays there. It just feels like everyone failed in that situation. And listen, I know that emotions get the best of them, but like Brian Dable chewing out Tyrod Taylor and yelling and screaming, making sure that everyone knew that he didn't call that play seems a little bit crazy. Like, that's you and your offensive coordinator not making sure that things didn't happen. You need to swallow that as the head coach and say, we failed on all the offensive side, not just on Tyrod.
And by the way, if you watch that replay back, he first looks to Kafka and is like, what the F? And Kafka goes, I don't know. As in, I don't know why Tyrod did that. Again, to be in there and understand who said what to who when. But basically, Brian Dable is looking down. Who do I look to? Where does this blame go? And for a team that we perceived had shifted some play calling away from Kafka and to Brian Dable, it just, again, when things are going wrong for a team, those type of moments get read a little bit differently than when he chews out Daniel Jones a year ago. Hey, you got to make that play. You can't throw the pick at the corner there trying to get to Saquon, right? Like, hey, he's just being hard-nosed about it. But then these moments, when this team hasn't scored a touchdown in 13 quarters offensively, it does start to raise an eyebrow. And I'll go to what was prior to the turnover on downs and the second missed field goal for the Buffalo Bills. The Giants have the ball, and they go on a first down play to Wan'Dale Robinson. They make it a 2nd and 5. And then on that second down play, they go to a running play to Saquon Barkley. Now, in the previous drive, he had those 2 big runs. So I get it. The home run hits are available. There's also 73,000 examples in this game of him getting hit 2 and 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. There's a world, like I said it in real time watching that game going, that was it. That's everything that Saquon had left for you, right? Because his ankle is not 100%. They talked about he had to mostly stay north and south. He gave you 2 beauties of a play. So not only do they call that play, which I think is a little bit insane, but they also, if you watch, they run Jalen Hyatt in motion. And when they run him in motion from left to right, it brings the linebacker right over to the exact lane that Saquon is supposed to run through there. It ends up making a 3rd and 8. It kind of breaks down from there. There's other things I want to get to in this game, including what people believe the perception is of that end of half play from Tyrod relative to game script. But that is the microcosm for me of the offensive line is bad. Why aren't you spreading things out more? Why aren't understanding that Saquon is not 100%? Why aren't you running more sweep plays with him? Why aren't you getting him on angles towards the sideline as opposed to staying between the teeth and the tackles of this defense when you know outside of those 2 plays in the second half, there was nothing going on there. The expected yards per carry for him was something like 2.4, and on 18 carries, he had 32 yards. He was barely even getting to that because of how many negative plays there were, negative points of impact. I have a frustration around this offense and the way that they've approached the game calling here, and we're going to get into some of the shifts, player review, guys that were on the field more for the New York Football Giants than earlier in this season.
Yeah, you mentioned there were some good things. They decided to change things up with personnel. You could tell that they made a conscious effort with Tyrod to roll him out a little bit more or get balls out quicker just to be able to leverage someone like Wan'Dale Robinson in short, quick areas of space. 8 targets, 8 catches for Wan'Dale Robinson. That felt like it was working. But to your point, I kind of question that too. It's 2nd and 5, and you just run it into the line, and you're just putting more pressure on your team to feel like they have to make it at 4th down. It just seemed a little bit questionable, some of the play calling. And yeah, I'm with you. You know, Saquon broke a couple, but it felt like they needed to operate the 2-minute offense short and quick, get the ball out in space, tire that defensive line out with using guys like Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt.
And this is where, too, yeah, we're going to talk about Hyatt. We're going to talk about some of the reps that went around here for the New York Football Giants when it comes to snap counts, because it looks like there was a shift there as well. But you mentioned like Wan'Dale Robinson. I thought instead of it being plays where he was getting the ball 2 yards upfield in his hands, they were trying to get the ball into his hands when he was 7 yards upfield, finding those pockets to settle it down into it. And a credit to Tyrod Taylor that I'm going to give him here, because I think we need to address this point, is that when he had those quick drops and when he got the ball out of his hands, they were where they needed to be. They were on time. They were in the right spot. Had a couple of nice over-the-top passes to Darius Slayton, like perfectly thrown balls. That's not me saying, oh my God, Tyrod Taylor can throw a football. But you needed to have those be the plays, and I thought he held himself adequately. There were moments when that pocket is breaking down. Again, I don't want to do this thing where I'm saying, and this is why he's better than Daniel Jones. This is a difference between their game. His pocket scramble, the mobility that he has, is what afforded him to have a couple of little runs to get away from the pressure sometimes. And I honestly wonder if you kept running Tyrod Taylor out there week over week and he kept having to deal with that siege, would it start to progressively look more and more like what we've seen from Daniel Jones, where the shell shock happens, right? The lack of confidence happens. You're not sure if you can trust what you're seeing and being able to play effectively. But I thought Tyrod had a good game for himself. Nothing that he did made me think, oh, well, this is why Daniel Jones can't have success out there. No, I actually, if anything, I thought, well, it was relatively equal. And it probably indicates, at least for me, that Daniel Jones to this point has not shown that he is, Andy's favorite term, a force multiplier for this roster, because there's examples around the league of teams with bad offensive line play that have manufactured wins and that have quarterbacks older and younger than Daniel Jones that have looked far better.
Yeah, listen, I thought Tyrod Taylor did fine. If the idea is the expectations of a backup, he pretty much delivered on the expectations that you have for a backup. Can you come in and not just lose us a game, right? Like you want to stay competitive, you want to have an opportunity to win. I think Tyrod Taylor did that. He had a 50 QBR. It would put him about 18th, maybe 19th in the league over the course of a season. That's what you hope for from a backup. Like,
And
don't be the
against the
worst
good
player.
defense, right? Against the Buffalo Bills.
Just be serviceable. 5.6 yards per attempt is not very good, but also we saw his ability to try to send deep balls. If they count that one to Jalen Hyatt, or there's a couple of other plays that are made on the field, that looks better. I think Tyrod did fine. It also opened up my eyes to say, yes, Daniel Jones has to be able to push the ball downfield more, because when Tyrod did it, you saw what it does. It opens things up a little bit for Wan'Dale Robinson underneath. You saw getting Jalen Hyatt on the field is very important for this team moving forward, because he does add a new dimension. That big body catch that he had on fourth down to go up and
Yes.
get the ball to continue the drive. Those are the reasons why that guy needs to be on the field more often. And that's one of the things where they, from a personnel standpoint, they decided to leverage him a little bit more, made the offense look a little bit more dynamic.
Yeah, 100%, right? And it is. To me, the biggest takeaway was the downfield plays. If you are going to be, Tyrod Taylor showing Daniel Jones, hey, you have to see and pull the trigger and live with the results, because again, week in, week out, I will give a pass, quote unquote, to a team losing games if I see the attempts to go win the game were there. And that's what it looked like the Giants tried to do. Again, didn't get any touchdowns, but they attempted to do it. The other quick thing I'll just note here before we talk about these players and what could be a little bit of a shift here going forward, and I want to see where Andy stands on this. The other thing is, first of all, Tyrod Taylor is the backup quarterback. So the idea that you're going to sit here and say, like, he's the problem. You mentioned at the top two. Well, there wasn't a guarantee they were going to get a touchdown. They didn't get a touchdown at the end of the game either. They had a chance to do the same thing and win the game. And also, if you're going to say, well, that moment there, instead of at least being a field goal and being 12, which means they could have had a field goal to win the game at the end, that perceptually commits that everything in the second half goes exactly the same, that the Bills do miss both of their field goal attempts, right? Like, I just don't think that in the universe of football gods, that's the way you can live. That, oh, because of this, everything else would be the same, and then we would have won the game. We would have been up. There's a world where it was 20 points for the Buffalo Bills in this game on that final drive, right? And that would have needed the Giants to have had that field goal, maybe get a touchdown, a 2-point conversion. You can't live in those worlds. So I really was not surprised, but disappointed to see the way they wanted to hang their hat, a lot of Giants fans, on that moment as being, well, there you go. That's why you lose it. No, don't try that.
The point still stands. The Giants didn't score a touchdown on offense. They
Yeah.
they like
It wasn't
that,
the only possession.
yeah, exactly. Like there was multiple possessions. They had the ball down at the one twice, got 0 points out of
Yeah.
both of those. The other drives stalled very similarly to how this offense had looked before, where they're settling for field goals instead of touchdowns. It goes back to a little bit of the play calling. It goes back to execution across the board. There's a whole host of things. I don't put all of it on Tyrod Taylor. Obviously, that end of the first half piece of it, sure, that still falls on him.
Yeah.
But yeah, Adam, overall, the offense still has to be better than what it was. Like you can squint and maybe kind of get yourself to believe that like the offense was significantly better, but we scored less than what we have averaged over the course of the regular season. And so like the offense still needs to do more. We saw little flashes of what downfield spreading out the defense can do, but overall they still have to get better. And the offensive line was marginally better. Shout out to Justin Pugh for being able to just let like a warrior get out there. Like, the intro, what a perfect intro when they're saying where they're from. He's like, from the seat of my couch, I'm coming in and I'm going against the team with the most sacks in the league. And then our left tackle gets hurt and I got to be out there. And you could tell, like, the first couple of plays, he's like, oh man, I should not be here right
I
now.
should still
But
be
then he
on my
actually
couch.
settled
That's
in and like gave us a chance. Whereas other games, like against the Dolphins, we literally had no chance to run an offense. So shout out to Justin Pugh for at least solidifying it. And I think Evan Neal also had a little bit of a better game. Like, we're hoping maybe he can get a little bit better. If he can become serviceable and we get John Michael Schmitz back and we get Andrew Thomas back and Justin Pugh goes back to the left guard position, not emergency left tackle, like, maybe we can actually run some semblance of an offense and like score a touchdown in one of these games, maybe.
the Justin Pugh thing is just insane, and it's also just the entire offensive line. You come out there now, Glowinski's back in the lineup as well. Bredesen's playing center. You're like, all right, these are all the guys that were starting when we started this season that weren't good enough to play, so we moved on from all of them. You mentioned, and you can see Zudu was dejected, takes no shoe on his foot, goes out. By the way, Harris for the Buffalo Bills, incredibly scary moment in this game when the ambulances are brought directly out onto the field. At least sounds like things are looking positive for him. So we'll wait to hear more about that. But everybody goes down this offensive line. And then Justin Pugh, to your point, guy hasn't been playing football. Now he has 150 plus reps at left tackle. I mean, you're talking about 2.5 games worth in his entire career. And they go, hey, by the way, buddy, I know you've been here for a week, but would you mind just popping out to the left tackle spot? And to your point, he played serviceable enough. And I think there's something in there of just having been in the NFL and having played, you at least, you have some semblance of, well, I know what they're going to try to do here, right? I know what I need to safeguard against. The first couple plays look brutal. And to your point on Evan Neal, one thing I think that has shifted here is he gets beat consistently getting around. Like when they go inside on him, he can keep his body between them. It's not always pretty. But I noticed, though, there seems to be a little bit of a design to say, yeah, let them take the long way. You just kind of, because there were several plays where he was just kind of tap touching the guy as he was heading around him, but not over committing to it, as if he was keeping his eyes on the interior. And you're just alerting Tyrod Taylor. You're alerting everyone on the Giants to say, hey, it's going to come. We need to make our pocket progressively move away from that as we try to get our reads and get the ball out.
If you make the rush a little bit more one-dimensional from that side and you say, Tyrod, if the
Right.
pressure is going to come, it's going to come from around where you're facing it. You can see it and step up as opposed to coming directly at him when Evan Neal's getting beat inside and outside. Like, at least it gives you an opportunity to function as an offense. And that's what I was stressing last week is like, we got to be able to allow the quarterback to make reads, make progressions, and throw the ball downfield. Evan Neal did that. Tyrod Taylor started to do that. And you saw it. You saw glimpses of what an actual functioning offense can look like.
Let's talk about some of these snap counts quickly before we give our opinion on if anything has changed perceptually for us coming off of the 14-9 loss for the New York Football Giants, 1-5 now, as we'll wait to get an update. Presumably that Daniel Jones, it was precautionary to not play him in this game, but maybe you should have played him in this game, or maybe it's more concerning than you thought. We'll see. Everyone on the offensive line, we talked about those guys. McCathan got in there. He played 88% of the snaps because just get bodies in there. Let's all have some fun. But Darius Slayton played 87% of the snaps. Saquon actually gave you 60 snaps, 78%. That was a lot higher than I thought it was going to be for him. Jalen Hyatt, 73% of the snaps. Wan'Dale Robinson, 60% of the snaps. Even a guy like Bellinger, 53. And then notably, Isaiah Hodgins, just 23% of the snaps. Shepard had 1 snap and didn't even list because Paris Campbell had a special team snap, but did not get on the field offensively. This, again, in the what could we take away from this? It's actually a little bit harder because you played way more guys and had Saquon back. And these are the weapons that we think are the dynamic playmakers of the future. I am very buoyed. I know this is not the point of this, that Darius Slayton is like cemented with a role on this team. And he's been coming through when those opportunities have come. I actually can see him fitting really well when you have Hyatt, when you have Robinson. What did this tell you? What does this indicate to you about where the team is right now and whether or not they made the right choices in the offseason?
Well, it's a 2-for-1 because I think early on in the season they said, let's go with veterans. Let's go with Paris Campbell. We just signed him in the offseason where we have to ease Wan'Dale Robinson back in. He missed the first couple games coming off of that knee injury. And Jalen Hyatt's still learning the offense. So you have Isaiah Hodgins in there. What we're realizing is Jalen Hyatt's going to be here for a few years. So is Wan'Dale Robinson. They were both drafted relatively high by this regime. Paris Campbell has not looked great on offense as the free agent signing for Joe Shane. He's presumably not going to be here after this year. Sterling Shepard, probably the last year of his Giants tenure unless things turn around. And Isaiah Hodgins has flashed possession type capabilities in terms of, hey, I run the route, I'm reliable, I'm dependable, but he's not a
Guess what?
freak
League knows
athlete.
who you are now, right? You made some
Yeah,
plays
yeah,
last year. League's aware of
exactly.
you now.
Can he get 4 catches for 50 yards in a game? Absolutely. And there will be games where I think Isaiah Hodgins will be called on to do that. But I think you're probably of the same mindset as me. The season is slowly getting away from the Giants.
Sure.
Well, they're 1-5 now. Things are not looking promising for this year. Jalen Hyatt is the future. You hope Wan'Dale Robinson can stay healthy and is part of the future. You need to develop these players, but also it feels like they are more explosive on this offense, which is the type of play that we need to open things up for Saquon Barkley. So for me, I think it's 2 for 1. It's like, all right, the season's getting away. Veterans may not be here next year. Let's see what we've got with Jalen Hyatt. And I was impressed with the snaps that he had. That fourth down going to get the ball, the illegal man downfield that Jalen Hyatt made that catch coming across the field. He looked explosive. He looked good. Like he clearly is earning himself more and more reps. I'm sure you feel the same.
No, 100%. My only issue that I take with it is when you go back to the offseason after you had drafted Jalen Hyatt, you have Wan'Dale Robinson. You mentioned the injury concern coming back, that you have to safeguard against it. But Sterling Shepard was healthy in camp. You also brought in Cole Beasley. You also brought in Paris Campbell. My issue is only with the Paris Campbell signing because it cost you money. And I don't know where you could have put that money, but you should have put it somewhere else because you already had Sterling Shepard there. It was very easy to get Cole Beasley. It's very easy to get a veteran X and bring them into this thing if you needed to. So if you wanted to safeguard against something, I would have done it. I'll put it this way. I wasn't excited about Cole Beasley being on this roster, but if you told me they didn't spend the money on Paris Campbell and Cole Beasley was going to be the guy that started the year, fine. Wouldn't have bothered me in the slightest until Wan'Dale Robinson was ready to be back. So that to me feels like a misstep, understanding you had those injuries to work with. But I think that was a mistake by the Giants and by Joe Shane. Why bring in this player that is at best a flyer and it cost you a significant amount of money relative to the limited cap you have to work with?
And another player I want to point out is, can we just stop with Eric Gray returning kicks and punts, please? Like, I think it's time where we're taking square pegs and trying to put them in a round hole. Like, he almost bobbled one punt. He fielded a kickoff that he should have just fair caught. They would have gotten the ball at like the 25 or whatever, to pin the team back deep. They replaced him for Paris Campbell. Like, we let Jamison Crowder go because we thought we had this plethora of people that could handle it. And he looks great for the Commanders returning kicks. Like, if the guy was going to have one function, it's to be able to be serviceable there. Like, if Paris Campbell doesn't have a role on this roster, at least have him back there with some speed and acceleration trying to return punts, because right now it just feels like that is a challenge for the Giants on punt return and kick returns, especially.
Another player, another name, right? Jamison Crowder wouldn't have cost you hardly a bag of footballs to have him on this roster, and he has that ability on special teams, and that has plagued the Giants. Not a knock on Eric Gray. This is a knock on the Giants organization for, as you said, taking a guy that shouldn't be doing it and saying, why don't you go do that? Because we're trying to cultivate value with these players somehow. Now, we close out on this thought. We said coming in, what could you possibly learn? What could it possibly mean for the New York Football Giants? They lose a battle. They fought, and let's assume that within the next 2 weeks, Andrew Thomas is back and Daniel Jones is back. There's no reason to assume that, but let's assume. Did this change anything for you about what this season is and what the Giants' agenda should be going forward? Because I took the moment to say, I'm not doing win-loss, but I did take the moment to say, if you had won this game at 2-4, it'd feel very different. But the next 6 games, 2 against the Commanders, the Jets, the Raiders, the Cowboys, and the Patriots mixed in there. If the defense plays like this, maybe we're in the Jets model, right? Just do enough offensively that we scrape out some wins. But did this really change anything for you, especially through the prism of Adoree Jackson got a little dinged up in this game? He's maybe a trade name that's been talked about. What should the Giants be doing here coming off of a game? You could argue if they played every game the first 6 like they did yesterday, we'd feel a lot different regardless of record about this team.
Well, so I mean, you may sit here and say 1-5, the season is dead, but you mentioned some of those softer games in the Giants' schedule are coming up. I think even going into the season, would we have said that the Giants were likely to beat the 49ers, the way the Dolphins offense looks, the way the Cowboys defense looks right now? Those were tough games going into it. We're sitting in that stretch, as you mentioned it. They're going to play they're going to play the Commanders coming up, where it's basically going to be a pick'em game, and then they get the Jets, which is basically a home and home game for both teams. Those two games right after that is when the trade deadline happens, Adam.
Yeah.
If the Giants beat the Commanders, and we saw how the Jets defense is playing, they're awesome. But if the Giants find a way to win both of those games, you have to consider the season to be still alive, and you have to operate with the idea that maybe this team, if the defense plays the way that it is and the offensive line gets healthy, can at least be competitive in these games. You mentioned games against Packers, games against the Patriots who look terrible. The Raiders are coming up. Like, those are
The
games that you
Saints.
have an opportunity to win. The Saints defense looks great, but their offense has been questionable. There are games on the schedule where you're like, if you squint long enough, it could be a coin flip, and maybe this team can get closer to 500. And a lot of the other wildcard teams lost over the weekend, Adam. So for me, really, the season boils down to the next two games. If they lose to the Commanders and lose to the Jets, clearly the season is over. The trade deadline's upon us, and you really have to be planning for 2024 as opposed to 2023.
Yeah, and then you remember too, if you're talking about even that idea of just hanging on, we're not saying it's the Giants trying to make the playoffs, but the perception that they still could, as you mentioned, wild card teams losing. Whether it's the Commanders who are 3-3, and you have the two games against them, the Saints are at 3-3, and the Chargers are at 3-3. Those are the Rams, excuse me, are at 3-3. Seattle, I mean, you have three wild card spots. These are like the third place teams in all these divisions. Atlanta lost as well. It's just you've got every team ahead of you. The Giants are fifth right now on Tankathon for the number one overall pick pursuit. It's weird because a game like last night does make me look and relative to how these other teams have performed, look at the schedule and go, yeah, I actually think the Jets game is potentially going to be a real gut punch, because I think that defense is so good in a different way than other teams they've played so far this year. That could be a real gut wrenching loss potentially, especially being there essentially at home. Oh no, it is a home game for the Giants technically, but the Patriots, the Packers aren't as good, right? The Saints, as you mentioned, like all these games, and the start of the schedule. What do we think? Seattle was the other winnable game there, right? Like we thought maybe the Giants would be a 2-4 team here, even playing well, until this offense puts points on the board, though. That's the problem. The problem is that all of these games you look at, oh, they're winnable. Well, they are winnable, but you have to remember. I just heard this morning. Sam Howell has thrown for the most passing yards in Washington Commanders franchise history through the first 6 games of their season. Like, this is a team that has put up 20, 35, an ugly loss against the Bills, but also put up 31, ugly loss, but still put up 20 points, one against the Falcons with 24 points. Even if there are bad teams in the league, they're bad teams that have a functional offense. And I really need to see the value of Wan'Dale Robinson, of Jalen Hyatt, right? Of the return of Saquon Barkley. I need to see this turn into success in the red zone, because you can't tell me over these next 6 games or the rest of the season that this team is going to go out and win 15, 12 games. It's just, as good as the defense has looked of late, they're going to have a letdown too. It just happens. It's the nature of football. And I won't be shocked. We'll talk about later this week. I'm not going to be shocked that this Commanders game is a bit of a letdown, because the last 2 weeks, the defense has been building, and I just don't know what to anticipate from this offensive side of the ball. And we still don't have a real strong case for what is going to happen with Daniel Jones and what's going to happen with Andrew Thomas.
Plain and simple, you have to win both of the next 2 games. And the Jets defense looked amazing bottling up the Philadelphia Eagles with no Sauce Gardner, with no DJ Reed. The Giants have to
Right.
win those games if you have any realistic idea that they could make a run or they're poised for something this season. If the Giants split those games or they go 0-2, then we really got to shift our attention to who can we get valuable trade, who can get us draft capital coming up after the Jets game, and what does the rest of the season look like? Because without those 2 games, you can't even dream of the Giants making a run or doing anything for the rest of the season.
No, you're 100% right. It is impossible to look at this team and think anything other than they're going to lose most of the games they play. Why? Because they've lost most of the games that they have played. At the end of the day, Andy, it was a hard fought game for this defense. I actually, as you said, the offensive line, that's what we'll get into this week. What does Justin Pugh mean now for this offensive line? He had to play left tackle, but if you put him back at left guard, do we start to have a little more confidence in the construct of this line if Andrew Thomas can get back? And we'll dive a little bit deeper. about even if you could split the next couple of games, even if you could win both of them, should that matter? And should the New York Football Giants, in fact, have gone with every young player to start this year rather than the hodgepodge of veterans we saw them try out there to start the season? In the meantime, you get over to YouTube at One Giant Podcast. You get us on Twitter at One Giant Podcast, at AndyMac214, and at Adam Armbrecht, and also on the podcast feeds wherever you get those needs fulfilled. Get after us. We're very curious. Is Tyrod Taylor the bane of your existence? Has the offensive play calling let you down? Get into the comments. Ask us the questions. We'll be breaking this thing down, heading towards that divisional matchup next week. And until next time, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand that people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.